To see how far we can get. We're in chapter 2. We got there last week. We were supposed to finish. So I'm going to stop talking about what happened and get into today. The first three verses was, as far as we got. But we started looking at some repetitions in this chapter. And as we go through, I'm kind of trying to bring out some things that I look for when I study a book. And one of the things is repeated words, repeated phrases, repeated ideas. It gives me an idea of what's being highlighted. Chapter 1, what was the repeated word that came up so often? Anybody remember? Return. In chapter 2, does anybody remember from last week what the repeated word is in chapter 2? Redeemed, because it says up there. Nice try. It is glean, actually. Comes up about a dozen times in this chapter. It's a third of the uses in the Old Testament are in the book of Ruth, and they're all here in this chapter. And glean isn't necessarily any kind of theological term. It means exactly what you think it might mean, and that is to go out into the fields and harvest or gather the things in. But I wanted to look at where this idea was used in other passages, because sometimes, just like today, you might have a word or an idea that alludes to something in a story that's much bigger. We do that all the time in poetry, but even in movies, we might refer. If I tell you that guy looks like he's doing some 007 stuff, you know what that means, right? He looks like he's a secret agent somehow. How do you know that? Because you know something about 007. Well, I'm just looking to see if there's anything about this of ideas would be here besides just the domestic going out and working in the fields. Is there anything to this in Scripture? And some of the ideas we were looking at last week are coming from the law. Ruth being what, the seventh book? There's not many books before it. These are the books that, what you'd be thinking of when you thought of the word glean. Exodus, we looked at some of these last week. Exodus gives us an idea of uh, God providing the manna. The people were to sojourners could come behind you and take from it. And you might not think that's a lot of food, but I tried to teach this principle to my kids, mostly because I was impatient. We would go out and pick blackberries, right? And once we got into it, some of my kids would want to stay there until every single blackberry was gone. And I was thinking, well, let's just get the best ones and keep moving. Let's move along. So I tell them, maybe we should leave some for the deer, right? So let's have some care and concern for those who come after us. And that kind of idea is taken up in this law. And then later on in the same chapter, you get the law about love your neighbor as yourself. This is where this law comes out of. And then Leviticus 23 is talking about the Feast of Weeks and how you are to worship God with those harvest, the wave offering, the grain offering, and things like this are a part of that. And then at the end there, it says, make sure you leave some of your gleanings for the poor and the sojourner. It kind of repeats that again. It gives you the idea that God wants everybody to be able to worship, and he doesn't want you to take it all. And somehow that is going to make God happy because you left other people out. He wants everybody to be able to worship. At least that's the idea that I get coming from thinking about why that might be there. Deuteronomy, these two passages don't actually use the word glean, but they are obviously referring to the same thing that the law was referring to in Leviticus. Deuteronomy 24 Verse 19 through 22, but I'll read in particular 21. When you gather the grapes of your vineyard, you shall not strip it. Afterward, it shall be for the sojourner, the fatherless, and the widow. So there's that same law. And then verse 22 says, you shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt. Therefore, I command you to do this. Again, God's idea here is you were once in a situation where you would have longed to have food, and the only way you could have it was that I provided it with that manna. Now, there are people in desperate states. Don't strip things bare. Remember, you were once in a position where you were dependent on the mercy of others, in particular, God Himself. But here, as part of this law, if you want to be following this law, it's going to give you the idea of humility. You were once in this place. Deuteronomy 10, 17 through 19, it says, the Lord your God is God of gods and Lord of lords, the great, the mighty, and awesome God, who is not partial and takes no bribe. Okay, so that's who He is. That's quite a description there. This is what He does. He executes justice for the fatherless and the widow, and loves the sojourner, giving him food and clothing. Verse 19 is a direction. That's who God is. That's what He does. This is what you do. Love the sojourner, therefore, for you were sojourners in the land of Egypt. Now, this passage is saying the exact same thing, but it's coming in the context of this bigger passage about God wanting to circumcise your hearts. This is about who you are from the inside out. It's not just about you following the letter of the law. It's about why you're doing this, because of who God is and how He showed love and mercy and grace to you. This is why you're doing this, because God expects you to be like Him. So that is, again, every time this word glean comes up, it's the same word that's used in some of these passages, the same ideas about gathering and picking up. But who do you gather from? What are you to be thinking while you're gleaning? This would be things they were thinking of, especially if this was done in the context of Feast of Weeks, for example. And as they're gathering and they're leaving things behind, they're thinking about, well, God did this for us. Interesting to think about, something going on in the background as you're reading through this. Again, it's not written in isolation. All of these things are in the larger context of Scripture. But I would point out that if this is what they are doing for Ruth and other sojourners and the poor, why are they doing it? Just out of the goodness of their heart? After reading those passages, why would the Israelites be doing this? Obedience to God. Okay, so we can start there with God says so. Now we come back to this question. Do you see God in the story of Ruth? Yeah. Ruth wouldn't have found much out there if it wasn't for God's law here, reminding people to care for the sojourner. So yeah, we see Him in His sort of setup of this is how we're going to do welfare. You're going to take care of the poor and the sojourner. You're going to make sure they don't starve. You're going to do that by not taking it all for yourself. You're going to remember the state that you were once in. So that's kind of all coming from just that one word there that's repeated. We also see in these first three verses a description of Boaz. I'll read the section here. Naomi had a relative of her husband's, a worthy man of the clan of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. How's he described? Worthy. Does anybody have a different translation? Might say something else. A man of standing. Yep. Of great wealth. Wealth, standing. Some say power. Some say excellence. How is one word meaning all that? Well, because that one word can mean all of those things. This was the word that was picked to describe Boaz. And we might think to ourselves, okay, in what way, right? What aspect of this word describes Boaz best? Well, as we continue through our story, I think we'll find that that's a pretty apt description of him. He is a prominent man. He is a wealthy man. If he's prominent and wealthy, he's got some power. We see his virtue, his excellence as the story continues. And as the word is used again in the book to describe Ruth, who is not powerful or wealthy, but a woman of character, a woman of standing, you might say, morally. Boaz also fits that same description used here. So this is the Boaz. We see him in the story with fields and servants, with power to make decisions and wealth to follow through with those decisions. By the way, I think I mentioned this before. Ruth, verse 11 of chapter 3, is described with the same word. And again, this is the word that's used in Proverbs 31 to describe an excellent wife. Excellence. That's the word. An excellent wife who can find, an excellent woman who can find. This is the word that's used to describe Boaz and later on Ruth. What is Ruth looking for here in this section? Sorry? Food. Yeah, food, work. Anything else you see? Huh? Favor. Right. Favor. That's a word that's going to come up a few times as well. Keep that in the back of your mind. And favor in this sense is definitely the work. But she is going to go out, she says, go out to the field and glean among the ears after him in whose sight I shall find favor. She is hoping that somebody's going to allow her. She's hoping somebody's going to give her permission, right? That's the favor she's looking for. Yeah, that definitely leads to food, right? But the favor, it includes all of those things. Sorry? Yeah, Boaz is kin to Naomi. Yep. Relative of her husband Elimelech. And so, at the very least, by marriage, right? So he's described that way a couple times there. Relative of her husband's, clan of Elimelech. And then in verse 3, again, clan of Elimelech. That is important to the story. Again, how do I know? Because it's being repeated. We need to know this piece of information, and that comes up later on in chapter 3 and 4. We begin to see why it is so important that he is related to Naomi. So she's looking for. Yeah, go ahead. Do you think with all that's happened to her, all that's happened to Naomi, losses that she had, goes back to Naomi's native land with her. But when she says that she's looking in whose sight I shall find favor, again, he was a worthy man and evidently a wealthy man. And I don't mean that she was, trying to take advantage of the situation, but do you think she was looking for help and that they needed help as a family or whatever and so forth? He was a wealthy man. I don't know if we imply that from in whose sight I shall find favor or not. It's a possibility as the story develops, because when we see this word again, favor, in verse 10, when she's describing favor, she's not specifically talking about getting permission. There, she's talking about the recognition that Boaz shows to her, that he is speaking to her with such kind words. That's the favor that she mentions there. And then in verse 13, she finds favor again in the comfort of the words. I may have got those mixed up. Verse 10 and 13 also describe this kind of favor that she's looking for. I don't know exactly how much they've planned this, but chapter 3 definitely Naomi's everything's fallen together for her, and she's finally thought to herself, now I see. Now I know how to work this situation, and she's got a plan all laid out. This one, at least to me, it reads as maybe Naomi has just lost all will or desire to do anything. I don't know that she was too infirm to go out and gather herself, but here the word that is used is, it sounds like she's asking permission from Naomi. Please let me go. Why would you have to ask permission to go and get food? It seems to me that Naomi might just be sitting there just mourning and bitter and not even willing to get up and go find food. And finally, Ruth, I may have mentioned this last week. I feel like I'm saying something similar. Uh, in chapter 1, the last thing we hear Ruth and Naomi say is Ruth saying, I will never leave you. And then the first thing we hear her ask in this chapter is, can I leave you? And I understand that she's not asking to leave her permanently, but it's interesting that there is definitely some change that's come over Naomi, that Ruth feels, I need to ask her if we can go get some food, because otherwise we're going to starve. So she goes out looking for favor of some kind. Now, I don't think that they were planning for her to end up in Boaz's field necessarily, because we're told she happened to come to this field. Now, depending on the translation, it might use slightly different words, but the two words together would say something like, she happened to happen, or she accidentally encountered. And if I'm understanding the Hebrew language experts, it's a hyperbole. It's a hyperbole that points to intention, not accident. Kind of like when we use a double negative, what we're actually saying is something that's positive. But this hyperbole is pointing toward intention, but not intention of Ruth or Naomi. It's the intention of a hidden figure, which in our case would be who? God. Now, this isn't the only time this kind of phrase is used in Scripture. And again, you see God working in these moments of happening to happen upon a field. Again, I don't think they were purposing to go to Boaz's field, but they were looking for favor. Was that me? What was that noise? They were looking for favor, and I think God's providence can be seen in them ending up here. So Ruth goes out, she gleans, she's very purposeful in that matter, in that regard, but God is seen in taking care of the details. And it's interesting that they're going through such a rough situation. The tendency, I think, would be to think, God is not doing anything. I'm going to have to go out and do something myself. And yet, God is there, making sure she ends up in the right spot where she will find the favor that they need. Let's go look at the next few verses 4 through 7. 4 through 17, really, that all happens, the majority of this happens out in the fields, this chapter, not in Bethlehem, but they've gone out, and there's some discussion back and forth through people. But here, the first section, Boaz is asking about who this person is. Verse 4 says, Behold, Boaz came from Bethlehem, and he said to the reapers, The Lord be with you. And they answered, The Lord bless you. Then Boaz said to his young man who was in charge of the reapers, Whose young woman is this? And the servant who was in charge of the reapers answered, She is the young Moabite woman who came back with Naomi from the country of Moab. She said, Please let me glean and gather among the sheaves after the reapers. So she came, and she has continued from early morning until now, except for a short rest. Boaz asked, Who is this? Verse 4 there, before we get into Boaz, look at verse 4 and how they're speaking to each other What kind of people are these? What kind of idea can you get from their greeting? Yeah, godly. They're referencing God, aren't they? And this is again in the context of the judges. We've got these people who are. It is not lost on them that God is caring for them, and the way they greet each other gives you an indication of who's on their mind, as they even say hello. Boaz asked about Ruth. Why does he ask about Ruth? She was new. She didn't. Sorry, is that what you said? Yeah, yeah. She's a new person. Is not usually there. He doesn't recognize her. I guess hasn't seen her before. How is Ruth known, or how is she described? Okay, a Moabitess that all over the place. She's called a Moabite. Yeah, here too. Yeah. Uh, yes, that's right. She came back with Naomi. That's right. Anything else? She's a young woman, a young Moabite who just happens to be from Moab. That's repeated several times. I think that's an underline there. And she's connected with Naomi. Um, why is she there? Yeah, yeah. I mean, she's not like somebody who's begging. She's not unwilling to work, is she? She's perfectly willing and able to get out there and work, but she is out there in the field because she has to be. That's the only way she can gather food. So we get even in that description a picture of she's poor without just coming right out and saying she's poor. She's been working all this time. Obviously, she's in need, and she seems to be a hard worker as well. Um, anything else from this passage? I'm going to move to the next, if nothing else you see. Naomi's family must not have been very close. Why do you say? Yes. Well, he didn't. He would. I don't know that he would have recognized Ruth. I think from his response in this next section, we're going to see he does know the story. He does know that Naomi's back and everything that's happened, but he doesn't recognize Ruth. Yes, but it was so Ruth married Naomi's son, but it was after they had already left Bethlehem. So there wouldn't be any reason for him to necessarily know what she looked like. Right? They didn't get on FaceTime in the evening and chat. Right. So yeah, it's perfectly reasonable that he would not have recognized her. And I imagine if she's got Moabite garb, she may have stood out, but he still might not realize, make the connection to who is the foreigner in our field today. But they clear that up, and we get another description of how the people there view her. And again, Moabite is mentioned twice. So that tells me that's how they're looking at her. She's foreigner. She's a foreigner. She's a young foreigner that came back with Naomi, and she's poor. This is who she is according to the people. Then we get this next section, an interaction between Boaz and Ruth in verses. Oops, I skipped one. Verses 8 through 10. Then Boaz said to Ruth, "Now listen, my daughter, do not go to glean in another field or leave this one, but keep close to my young women. Let your eyes be on the field that they are reaping and go after them. Have I not charged these young men not to touch you? And when you are thirsty, go to the vessels and drink what the young men have drawn." And she fell on her face, bowing to the ground, and said to him, "Why have I found favor in your eyes that you should take notice of me, since I am a foreigner?" There's that foreigner idea again. Um, do you, well, I underlined it. I keep asking if you noticed, and then I realize I've underlined it. Just assume that you figured this out. What is Ruth? What does Boaz urge Ruth to do 4 times? Yeah, good job, Betty, on the ball. She knew it. Yeah, stay near, stay close. He uses it, he says it 4 different times. It's interesting that he is urging her so diligently. Why do you think that is? Sorry? Protection, for sure. He mentions the men, right? I've told them not to touch you, which again suggests what might be common. Foreign woman, somebody vulnerable, is going to be molested in some way. Yeah, it's a possibility. He might have found her attractive, although he's not willing to go that far, at least in word yet. But yeah, that's a possibility too. You know, it's very interesting that Nikki said that because that's what my wife is saying over said to me. Okay. Yeah. You may have found her attractive, and I think there may be some indication to that. Okay. Yeah, yeah. No, there's nothing wrong with it. I think there is indication of it as the story progresses, for sure. Uh, but there's this thing that happens in all cultures, right? Uh, there might be somebody you find attractive, but they're not in your group, right? They're part of another world. Romeo and Juliet speaks to so many different cultures because it's true. There are people you associate with, and there are people you don't. There's so many differences, and we're not going to have time to get to this part of the story, but let's just think about it. She's at most a field worker. He is a field owner. She's a young woman. He is an older man. What else? What other differences do you see? She is a relative that he does want to protect. That is a reason for them to come closer together. What keeps them apart? She's a foreigner, right? He's not a foreigner. So there's all kinds of reasons that might say she's attractive, but yeah, she's not going to be interested in me. She's not going to want to have anything to do with me. And again, we'll see that very thing come up in the 3rd chapter. But here again, Ruth finds grace. He urges her to stay close, to stay in his field, and as you mentioned, it might be because he wants her there, because he wants to give her protection. I think those are good reasons. Yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. From the beginning, I think there's a definite change in the mother-in-law at the end of chapter 2, where something clicks with her. I'm not sure that it's clicked yet. At least, as you're just going from the story, forgetting the rest. But it's obvious that the place that she needs to glean from is the fields of close relatives. If for nothing else, perhaps she'll be more protected because they are relatives, and she trusts them more than she would other people. But it could be that she's already thinking about, well, it's a long shot, but maybe you'll find some favor with with one of the clan of Elimelech. Boaz That's a good question. There is no indication that he was married, but he is an older man. Perhaps he was married, lost a wife. Perhaps he was married. Sometimes, I mean, their grandson, well, let's see, great great grandson Solomon, did he have one wife? No, he had like 1,000 women to take care of. So it wouldn't be unknown for him to have more than one wife, but no other wives are mentioned, right? So, what favor? She speaks of a favor. What favor did Boaz show here? Okay, he noticed her. He saw her. He saw that she was a foreigner. Hmm. Yeah, he found out she came with Naomi, and he saw her, and despite her being a foreigner, and that being underlined even by the author again and again, he was going to show her compassion. That's a good point. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah, Ruth is referred to is just presumed by Naomi to be now my daughter. You are part of our family. And so as the story progresses again, we will see Naomi just expecting Ruth to have all the same benefits as a natural child, a son or daughter. So yeah, there is that closeness in this story as well. Um, so he sees her, and he's going to show compassion to her, which again, from the laws that we just looked at, that's the whole reason for those gleaning laws. I showed you compassion in Egypt, therefore you show compassion. God showed grace to them. Now Boaz is showing grace. So we have God's grace just trickling down from him down to this very intimate relationship. This one foreign woman in a field is being affected by God's law. Yes, sir. Yeah. 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 Right. So he's given her the protection, the food that she is looking for, that she craves, and even if just being in the field of Boaz wasn't enough, he's already spoken to his men, who we have no reason to believe they're going to molest her, except that he says, "I told them not to. I told them not to touch you, not to bother you." And it could be, depending on the way you look at it, it could be that the men were saying, "No, stay back. You sit here and just wait for our field master to come. You're not allowed to glean with us. You don't need to be coming out here in the field." It could be that they told her to sit there and wait, and she's waiting for Boaz to show up. But Boaz wipes all that away and says, "You come on. You be a part of this. And I'll make sure you're protected. I'll make sure you have the food that you need." Again, showing that compassion from God. Then there's another interaction between Ruth and Boaz. Um, she just said, "Who am I that you're showing such favor? I'm a foreigner." Boaz answered her, "All that you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband has been fully told to me, and how you left your father and mother and your native land and came to a people you did not know. The Lord repay you for what you have done, and a full reward be given you by the Lord, the God of Israel, whose wings you have come to take refuge." Then she said, I have found favor in your eyes, my lord, for you have comforted me and spoken kindly to your servant, though I am not one of your servants. So she asks, right? Why are you showing me favor? I'm a foreigner. He gives her an answer. He gives her three answers. Can you see the three answers? What three answers does Boaz give to Ruth's question about why he showed favor? Yeah, he's heard the story about Ruth's kindness, right? That the kindness, God show you the kindness you showed your mother. He's heard about that kindness. And as a part of that kindness, what other reason does he say? Yeah, right. Left her family. So on top of just being kind to Naomi, you left your family behind. And then you sought refuge. You came here, you sought refuge from God, the God that I serve. So he gives her three reasons in response. But he does so he's not just saying that I'm doing this because God said to do it. But that is why he's doing it. God said it, but this is the love and compassion that God showed him. He sees it as not just God showing the nation of Israel grace and compassion, but God showing Boaz grace and compassion. Remember, they've just come through a plague, not a plague, a famine. And now God has visited them and brought them food. He, in his mindset right now is, I am in no place to deny somebody grace and kindness because I know what God's done for me. And I'm going to do that for you as well. So God does say to do this. Treat others how you want to be treated. Love your neighbor as yourself. And he is going to do that in this very illustrative, compassionate act. In other words, since we're almost out of time, if you want to look at the book of Ruth as just a love story between two people, I think that you will miss some deeper meaning here. This is not just about how you treat somebody you're attracted to or how you treat somebody that's a family member. This is about how you treat somebody that is vulnerable, that is in need, that is lost. This is about how you treat everyone because of the way God treated you. This is a description of love your neighbor as yourself. Now, again, you have to take yourself out of the love story for a moment to see that. Now, let's put ourselves back in the love story. Anybody in here ever been married? Anybody in here ever had problem, some sort of, we'll call it discussion with your spouse when there was something that you didn't agree on, maybe? Anybody ever found it hard to get along sometimes with that person that is your love story? And yet, so many times, how does that story develop? It develops into, I'm not showing her compassion and love and grace because she's not showing it to me. That's not what the story of Ruth and Boaz is about. Why is he showing her grace and love and kindness? It's coming from God. He's going to love her. She's a foreigner. He's seen how she treats Naomi. That's great. But he wants her to be blessed with compassion and love because God's done it for him. And he wants to show her that God can do better than she can with Naomi. Maybe I'm reading between the lines a little bit, but I see that there. I don't want you to think of this just as husband and wife story. Apply it to your life and everybody you come into contact with. Who's the foreigner? Who's the outsider? Who's the person who is in need? That might be your Ruth. Not saying you'll fall in love with them or get married to them or have kids with them or get inheritance with them, whatever. But that is somebody you can show love to like God showed love to you. Now, you'll only see that if you have experienced that great love for God and you want to show that back to Him and you show it to others like a Ruth. Uh, so I thought the bell would ring before I finished my sentence. Anybody have any comments or questions? Was this, yeah, wow. Was this the first harvest after the famine? There is a good possibility that it is, because the reason that Naomi leaves is because she has heard God has come back and visited them, which means there's no more famine, which doesn't necessarily mean that the food has been harvested and they have it, but that their crops are growing, right? And so when Ruth and Naomi come, they have just left the fields of Moab because they've heard that God has come. So I wouldn't be surprised if this was the first one, which, yeah, adds more to this idea of leave some. You might be starving. You make sure you leave some for the poor and those in need. Good point. That was the second bell. I don't see anybody else wanting to extend the class period any longer. Thank you for your attention.